You think you're eating enough protein. You're probably not, and it's costing you in strength and in recovery. In this video, we're going to talk about what protein is, debunk some myths, and then I'll show you how much you likely need. Hi, everyone. My name is Paris Stu. They call me P2. I'm a nutrition and fitness coach, and I work primarily with weight class athletes for performance nutrition. Now, quick note, I'm not a registered dietitian or a medical professional. Everything in this video is educational content from my perspective as a nutritionist. If you have any health or medical concerns, please see your physician. The problem that I've noticed over the past decade of coaching is that a lot of my athletes are under eating protein. They end up under eating in general, but usually the macronutrient that they're not getting enough of ends up being protein. Now, sometimes I've spoken about in other videos where carbs are demonized, but it is a little easier to actually get carbohydrates, especially if there is more convenience foods. But to get the adequate amount of protein target, it just requires a little bit of planning, preparation, and intention. And especially if there is certain aspects of your strength or your training that haven't improved, I would invite you to look to see if you're eating enough and then to see if you're eating enough protein. What is protein and why does it matter? So first of all, protein provides amino acids for protein synthesis. That's basically our body building and repairing muscle tissue. Now, training itself breaks down muscle protein, and then having dietary protein helps us replenish that and to rebuild stronger. Without the intake of enough protein, we end up being in what's called a negative protein balance. And that essentially means where we're breaking down more than we're building. And this is especially true if you are in the senior years. Overall, protein is just really important for all of us. So protein isn't just about, the gains in the gym. It also does other things that are really, really important for just our life and quality of living. For example, being satiated, having balanced blood sugar, feeling like we're full longer. And of course, I mentioned the recovery, not just between training, but just like having adequate energy throughout the day also. We have essential and non-essential amino acids. We have the non-essential amino acids, there's 11 of them, and then we have 9 essential amino acids. Why they're called that is because our body cannot make them. So they do come from what we ingest. Let's talk a little bit about numbers. Now, there is a range of your protein target. And what we're going with is 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. That would look like 0.7 grams to 1 gram per pound. And if you're looking at a 150-pound athlete, for example, then that's roughly 105 to 150 grams of protein. Now, what's with the range? A couple of different reasons. So first, there's a variety of different athletes. We come in various shapes and sizes, doing a lot of different sports that have different variables, different outputs, different intakes. And so, for example, maybe an endurance athlete has a little less protein and higher carbs. Maybe a strength athlete is having somewhere moderate in the middle or slightly higher for muscle mass. And then if you are doing some other like field sports, then you're somewhere in the middle. These are just some rough suggestions. But essentially, there's a couple of things that we're also considering when we're trying to figure out the numbers. Right now, though, I want to talk about one of the common myths of timing. For the most part, a lot of us know that anabolic window that's supposed to be 30 minutes after a workout, where it's the ideal time to have that whey protein shake. That's not necessarily true because that anabolic window is more like a door and it's a jar, and it doesn't mean that it's like 30 minutes and time's up. Like, you actually have hours. What you are looking to do is essentially have enough protein throughout the day. Your body has what's called an amino acid pool, and there's a reserve of amino acids that are circulating our body, in our bloods and our tissues. And so when we have the anabolic window, that's not necessarily accurate because it doesn't just disappear, the amino acids you have, but of course you want to top them up so your body can utilize them. And so what we want to focus on is to reiterate our total protein intake. So let's go with 150 because that's an easier number. So that 150 grams. And then what we want to do is look at the distribution throughout the day for a couple of different reasons so that it's easier to ingest. It's easier to plan and be a person, human, and train. And also it's most optimal for the protein synthesis. So if you have 3 to 4 meals and you've divided your protein evenly, it's just a lot more beneficial and just easier to manage than if you had everything in one shot. On that note, let's move on to some of the other common myths. So I just mentioned that range. If you are having beyond that range, so if you're at like 2.6 or 3 grams per kilogram body weight, you're really, really high, you're not necessarily adding more benefits. You're not going to have more muscles. It's just expensive calories, more beyond what your body is able to process. And so this is where the sustainability is a little bit more important rather than what's quote unquote optimal. For example, if you're an American football athlete and you're 350 pounds, 6'5", that's 350 grams of protein on that end. It's just hard to even ingest that throughout the day. So having less, okay, understandable. That's a bit more sustainable. And the other part, the sustainability, is the grocery budget. 350 grams per day is outrageous. So in general, the range is there for you to have sufficient amount, but also sort of navigate for individual needs. And having more of it doesn't necessarily mean that it's better. So just like the answer to everything isn't going to be more protein, I'm arguing that enough protein is sufficient. So like we don't want too little and we don't want too much, right in the middle. And that's common myth number 1. Common myth number 2 is the absorption. If you've heard that we can only have 20 to 30 grams per meal, that's technically what I just said about the nutrient timing of your meals for like ideal protein synthesis. Maybe you're looking at, let's say, a scoop of protein is usually a scoop of whey protein, for example, is 20, 25 grams. So maybe you're looking at 25 to 40 grams per meal. But that's not how much is absorbed. That's just like if you're meal planning or how much you want to be aiming for when you're eating. Your body can actually absorb a lot more and it doesn't care how much you're eating per meal because it just ends up going into the amino acid pool regardless. And then one more myth is that plant-based proteins are not good. What we're looking at again is that essential and non-essential that I was talking about earlier. So our complete protein sources are animal-based for the most part, and they include all of the 9 essential amino acids, and they end up being meat, fish, eggs, dairy. And then we have our plant-based options, and a lot of those will not have complete proteins necessarily per ingredient, but if you are eating variety throughout the day, and you're still getting your intake, then that's excellent. And you're still getting plenty of that quality and quantity. A word of caution, though, if you are choosing to go plant-based, it does require a bit more intention, effort, and work between the pulses and the grains and various vegetables to plan to make sure that you're having variety so that you can get all of your amino acids. And that's one of the reasons I personally am not one or the other. I'm not telling you to go vegan or carnivore. My perspective has always been what is sustainable and what you can do. Because if you were to hit, let's say, 300 grams of protein one day and then 50 grams the next day, or if you go a bit more moderate and it's something you can prep for that matches your life, that you have the grocery budget for, that matches your sport, there's a variety of other reasons, and that's what I'm looking at. Couple more tangible examples. So let's go with 70 kilogram long distance runner. They could be having about 112 to 155 grams of protein. Maybe their sources are Greek yogurt, chicken, salmon, and they had that with like one of their each meals. No problem. They hit those macros. And then you have, let's say, an 80 kilogram lifter athlete. And so their targets are about 128 to 175 grams of protein. Now, they could essentially take from our previous example and also have the Greek yogurt, chicken, and the salmon, but they're still technically short about 20 grams of protein. That could come from other sources. A really simple one would be to add in a scoop of whey. Okay, action steps. What do we do? Really, really simple would be to just take that range number that I mentioned, start at the bottom of the range, like the 1.6, and that's your base target. Then go ahead and track a few days. Use maybe the notepad on your phone feature or any app that's accessible and just start tracking your protein. And the most ideal would be if you were to weigh it, especially if you were going to do it for a few days, like use this kitchen scale and just see how much you're having just to really get that accuracy because If you're under eating, you want to know this for sure. And then you can see what that number ends up being. So let's say you've done that for 3 to 4 days, you can see your protein intake and then cross-reference that with your absolute lowest part of that range. And then you can make adjustments to push it a little bit more. And then you're then organizing your meals to make sure that you're having protein at each meal. How are you going to divide your target? So let's say if you're someone that requires 120 grams and you're having 3 meals, 120 divided by 3, easy enough. Or so on and so forth. And the opposite could be true, honestly. In my experience, there was only like 1 or 2 clients that ever had like the right amount of protein for their own needs, but that's because they had already put in some intention. And so our focus went to something else. But let's say you're tracking and you realize you're like, oh no, I'm having enough protein. Then great, power to you. You already are. Then perhaps you need to put your focus on some other aspect of nutrition that supports wherever it is that you're at. But to kind of sum that up again, you're looking at calculating 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of your body weight. It gives you a range. Start at the lower range, track it to see where you're at, and then divide your meals from there and aim to have them spread throughout the day. Make sure that you're fueled enough. And then if you are training multiple times a day, that's maybe you have to get a little bit more particular about when you're having what, just for better recovery and make sure that you're digesting well. It's really hard to eat like a giant piece of steak and then go immediately into training. Please check out the description box for how to work with me either one-on-one or through the group cohort in my Level Up framework. In closing, stop overthinking timing and focus on having enough throughout the day with quality sources of variety. You don't have to stress about everything being optimal, everything being perfect. If you are eating 3 times a day, you have a little bit of everything, that's sufficient. We don't want to have too little because that's bare minimum for human function, and we need it for a variety of reasons, especially if you're having higher demand of your body. And we also don't want to go absolute wild and have so much more than the range because that's not necessarily beneficial and it's just unsustainable and expensive. And then having that variety just makes it a lot easier. Yeah, I think that about sums up everything I wanted to share in this video. What's your biggest protein question? Please share it in the comments below and subscribe for more breakdowns of athlete nutrition. That's it, everyone. Thank you so much. Catch you next time.